Welcome to Tips for the Transition, where we have deep, meaningful conversations about life. We talk about how significant changes like divorce, grief, and career change can affect us, our family, our relationships, and our work, and how to move beyond them. I'm your host, Maria Tomás-Keegan, certified career and life coach for women, and I'm here to support you through the messy seasons of life so you can answer big questions like who am I now and how do I move on from here? If you're ready to consider new options, be inspired, and meet incredible women who are on this life journey with us, you're in the right place. You'll find something in each episode to give you hope and encourage you to move from panic to powerful, from rocky to resilient, and from upside down to right side up. This is Tips for the Transition. Welcome to Tips for the Transition. This is the Career Roadmap podcast. And I'm delighted to have you here. We're here every week at this time, live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And then on your favorite podcast channels after that. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host, and I am a career and life coach for women. And my vision is to create resources that help women navigate career and life challenges with more ease and grace, and to know that they are not alone. Each weekly conversation with inspiring women is intended to help women around the world become more confident, resilient, and brave as they do life and career. So if anything strikes a chord for you as we're having this conversation, please check out below this video to the show notes and connect with me or my guest to continue the conversation. So I have a question. Would you agree with me that when we struggle with career challenges, any challenges for that matter, that our mental health can take a hit? We start to feel unfulfilled, disconnected, maybe blaming ourselves for it. And when that happens, our physical health and our sense of well-being can go down the tubes right along with it. And it can feel like a firestorm. Well, today I'm talking with a woman who can help us create more harmony in our lives and careers when it feels like we're walking through fire. Her name is Stephanie Wray, and she is an expressive arts therapist, a mental health counselor, an artist, and a yoga teacher. And for the past 26 years, she's used the arts and movement in her own healing and self-care and assisted others in using the arts for better physical, mental, and emotional health. She's done this in clinical situations, in communities, and educational settings. And her last venture brings her online with her membership community called the Art Flow Lounge. So I am really excited about this conversation because I love to bring creative ways to address the mental and physical effects of career and life challenges. So we call this episode Finding the Flow Through Fire. And Stephanie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and for the introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know that a lot of women need to hear this conversation. So let's get started with a little bit of background about you. We all
Okay.
walk through fire at some point in our lives, but tell us a little bit about your journey. What was that like for you, and how did you make your way to finding flow?
So for me, mine was a literal fire. I drove home when I was 23 from work, and my apartment was on fire. And I had lived on my own since I was 17. So everything I had was there. And so that was kind of the journey that began my finding the flow process. And it was a pretty hard time. And someone recommended trying therapy. And I didn't even know what that was at that age. But I did. I went, and a therapist had me start making marks on paper. And that's how the journey began for me. As I kept making marks on paper, they started to make sense and mirror back to me things. I was involved in a movement class. So I started finding one thing on top of the other that kind of helped me start adding to ways that I could find the flow. And it ended up me going to art school at Naropa University, which is kind of an alternative type environment. It's more about the process of making art than the product. And that's always been my focus. Even though I am a professional artist, I have sold my work. My work, it comes from flow. So that is the journey. Of course, it's been long and there have been many fires to walk through, but these tools have been consistent for me. Not even tools, it's a way of life. And just, I think the biggest things that I've learned in getting into flow are connection, community, and finding a sense of play. And I think that's what some of the expressive arts help us do.
Thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine losing everything to a fire. That's one of the scariest things.
Yes.
But understanding and learning what can move you through it and beyond it is interesting. I'm always interested in hearing the different perspectives on the connection that you were talking about between our mind and our body. So take us through what happens when we experience a career or life challenge.
So, of course, it always depends on the circumstance, but let's just say it's not the best, right? And even if it is the best, we can still have stress. So we have stress is stress, whether it's positive or negative. It affects our body. Our mind perceives it the same way. And we usually go into fight, flight, or freeze when we feel stress. That is pretty common language these days, but you're either running away from it, you're freezing, not knowing what to do. Like when the bear when the bear is going to attack, people either run, stay still, or fight. And that's kind of the response that our body goes into and our nervous system goes into. And then we start having the thoughts, and then the thoughts feed the emotions, and it's kind of like we get into a loop. So those are some of the things that happen physically, right? And then when that happens, that kind of can make us not have clear decision making. It can affect our thinking. It can affect our sleep. So this autonomic nervous system stuff that happens affects us on every level. And it does happen when we have positive or negative changes. Yeah.
Okay. So how does the use of expressive arts help us during these times of stress?
So the way that the expressive arts help us are they can help us bring our nervous system into a calm state. So for instance, expressive arts encompasses movement, visual art, storytelling, rhythm. Rhythm's really important. So we're doing certain artistic or artistic expressions, but we're doing it for the reason to connect to community, connect to ourselves, moving to find rhythm and balance, and that moves us through a change, right? So we don't get stuck, or we're not like fighting the change. So getting into our body, understanding that we need these things to help us. So how do they help us? Well, there's a lot of research out there that talks about the benefits of meditation. I'm sure we've all heard that now. There's studies that show the benefits of art making. And when I say art making, I don't want to scare anybody away. You do not have to be an artist. It literally is making marks on paper. And sometimes that turns into things we recognize, but sometimes it doesn't. Even if you notice this painting behind me, this is mark making with paint. So I think that using these things, right? Yoga, breath, meditation, music, it stimulates our brain. It starts to help our brain work together rather than separate. Our left and right hemispheres can come more into alignment. We're more in our body. We can ground when we're more in our body. They help regulate the nervous system. They help with expression. But I think one of the most important things is it helps us find that sense of play that maybe we didn't ever have, or that we don't do anymore because we're adults. Because it's really hard not to have any fun or laugh when you put on a song and just start dancing to it in your living room, or when you put markers in two hands. We call it bilateral drawing, and you just are making circles on a paper. And if you go into it further, that helps connect both sides of the brain, and it's something that comes out of occupational therapy. But as those things go, we all adapt for our own work. So really getting that sense of joy and play back into our lives, even when things are hard, even when we're in a transition, because we want to have like a well of what we call positive resourcing, or resources that we can go to when times are tough. But we want to do it regularly so that we have already a well available to us when we get to the walk through the fire parts. Yeah.
Okay, so I love where this is going.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of things that people can do. So you've talked about meditation and breathing, uh, making marks on paper. Are
Yes.
there other things that could be included in expressive arts that people uh, might do as maybe a hobby that could work in the same way for them?
Of course. I mean, writing is part of the expressive arts. So journaling, or storytelling, writing poetry. There's a lot of people that really connect in writing.
Mhm.
So, they can do things like keep a journal. They can do like Morning Pages by Julia Cameron, where you just do like a brain dump. You don't even worry about what you're writing. You just throw it all on the pages. And then you don't even reread it. It's not even something that you look at again. It's just
It's
letting all
just
that, just let it
yeah,
out.
it's just letting it out, just getting the words out, the words
Right.
that are jumbled up in your head, you can't make any sense out of,
Yeah.
just get them out. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's great I have my clients do that a
Yeah,
lot because there's a cathartic
there
thing
is.
that happens
There
when
is.
you can stop in them just playing in your head.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was thinking about something that I have done for years
Okay.
when things that and it's a little bit different than any of the things you've talked about yet. Um, and it's one thing that allows me to be creative. So it gets my creative juices flowing, which is a happy place for me.
Right.
Um, so I do floral arranging.
Yes. That would be good.
And so it's using my hands,
Mhm.
using my imagination, and creating something of beauty to me, that I can now put somewhere in my home
Yes.
and enjoy. That for me is it's a happy place for me to go when things are not going as planned.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. That's a beautiful example. Um, some of it, right, is the expression part, which is what I'm talking about a lot. But there's also something to be said for taking something that you can control, right? Like, you can control what you're gonna do with the flowers. And then, like you said, use your imagination. So, yeah, you're walking through that process. You're having a relationship with yourself and the thing that you're working with.
Right.
You have control over it. And then there's senses come into it, which is a really beautiful part of expressive arts. And the example that you gave, because you can smell the flowers, and the flowers have color. And, nature and things like that are a beautiful example of getting into rhythm. We have seasons, we watch well,
Mm.
some people do. I'm speaking generally. Of course, if you live in a city, that's a whole nother thing, but I'm going to generalize.
Yeah.
Finding the rhythm within the seasons, and even within your daily walks, noticing, are there leaves on the ground? Oh, is that bud starting to come? So, yeah, I love the flowers and the nature. You bring me back to that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, it can be a hobby, it can be pottery. Some people love that, just feeling
Mm.
the clay on your hands. Even if you can never throw a bowl, just the act of that sensory expression of feeling the clay and having it move on it. Now, some people get super frustrated, but
Well,
that
yeah, I
could,
was just gonna say,
yeah,
and sometimes it's just as exhilarating to just go and
it
just make
totally
the
is. Yeah,
clay
I mean,
break up.
I'll work with clients and we call it wedging clay. So you just take a piece of clay and
Yeah,
you throw it on the table. You probably know this, but throw it on the table because it gets the air bubbles out. So when it's fired, it fires properly. But we will spend a whole session, sometimes more, just throwing clay. And when
yeah,
I'll notice, someone getting into a rhythm. So it's like an organic thing that people are supposed to experience is rhythm
right,
and
right,
that connection with our senses, right? Um, because our
right.
senses get very limited sometimes in the environments we're working in. So we have to learn to, I was thinking about like in an office space or even my office space, bringing in flowers, bringing in the, what do you call those things with the essential oils? Um,
Yeah, yeah, I have one going right now. It's something that helps me every
mhm.
day. I put peppermint
Yes,
in my diffuser,
that's it. Diffuse.
because peppermint helps me to focus.
Hmm.
So, it's a sensory thing.
Yes.
So I just want to be sure that anybody watching is not thinking that they have to be a writer or an
No,
artist. And you
no.
mentioned that before. You don't have to be a floral designer, but it's the connecting your senses, as you say,
Hmm.
and expressing them in some way,
Right,
which is literally getting them out.
right. And helping to balance our nervous systems, calm our nervous system,
Right.
nourish ourselves, find that sense of play, feel that sense of joy when you look at your thing or feel that squish or these
Right.
are very, very simple things, but we move so far away from it as we get older many times, right? Because what we're really talking about is play. I mean, we're talking about Play-Doh, we're talking about finger painting, we're talking about playing in the mud when we really look at it. And so I think sometimes that keeps people from trying because once you hit a certain age, it's like, well, I'm sorry, you're not an artist. You can't draw. Most people stop drawing at sixth grade.
Yeah.
And so if
Yeah.
you ask them to draw something, they'll draw something that looks like that and they don't think
Yeah.
they're good, right?
It could be doodling. I mean,
It's
I
doodling.
remember
Yeah.
I remember just sitting in when I was in college, sitting in class, listening, but my hand was always moving. I
Yes.
had doodles all over my notebook,
Yes.
and
Me.
it was my way to focus, to listen, and to get out this pent up energy that I had
Right.
because I was just sitting. Yeah.
Exactly.
It can be so many things, and I just wanna be sure everybody knows that they don't have to feel like they are creative
No.
to express themselves.
Right, and I don't even know necessarily that creative and expression are that related, right?
No,
I mean, we can express in so many different ways, but, all different kinds of art and what people consider creativity is expression, but, yeah,
right,
that's, I think, really important, and that's what I really created the Art Flow Lounge because I wanted a place for people who think they can't do art or think they aren't yoga people or, all the things that we think we're not. I
right.
want people to come experience, yeah, you are, you're human and you move and you even if you can just move your arms or just move your toes, we still can create rhythms. We still can I don't know, it's really beautiful.
I love what you do. I think this is so important for people to understand. So let me just ask you about this flow state. What is there more that you'd like to tell us about this flow state?
Okay, so there really is a science to the flow state and people have studied it. And a lot of times people will experience this through different things, right? And of course, I am an artist and I'm around a lot of artists. So I hear people talk about it in terms of creating. And what happens is you get into almost, I guess, kind of an alignment. And I call it, mind, body, spirit. You're getting into alignment with that. And you get into this rhythm where time kind of dissipates. You're doing this thing, and it's like all of a sudden you look up and you realize an hour's passed, and it felt like a moment. But it is a time physiologically where everything just kind of sinks and your nervous system relaxes. And when that happens, all these positive things in your brain happen. And I think one thing that people might be able to relate to is people that are like runners or, people that are really into exercise. Sometimes they talk about getting into a flow state. Like when you first start running, it really hurts, but then you hit that certain point and you're just gone and everything's shooting off in your body and you're just kind of floating. This is what I hear. I'm not a runner, but I have heard it described in this way. Um, and I know for me, painting is what happens. So flow state is where you're doing something that relaxes you enough that your mind body systems are connecting and calm. And for some people, that can be reading a book, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are maybe even thinking right now that that's how what you just described, that calmness, that, time stands still and flies by at the same time.
Right.
Could be, sitting with an electronic device in their hands. I'd like to discourage that.
Yes. Well, so
But
that's a little different because we know in studying that really that's giving us hits, right? Like dopamine hit,
right,
dopamine hit,
right.
dopamine hit. So actually you're creating more stress for yourself
Yeah,
doing.
yeah. You're stimulating stuff when you want to really
You're kind of
calm it
disassociating.
calm it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I love what you said. It is the flow state is a calm state where you are. Hmm, this happens to me when I'm designing floral arrangements and creating them. Time, it's as though time stands still.
Right.
Yet when I look at the clock, like you said, an hour or more has gone by and I'm working on this one thing and I just want to get it. I just want to get it right. I want to get it the way I want it, the way I imagine it.
Right.
And I just keep working on it until it does. I'm not stressed at all about it. It will end up being what it is. And I often have, elements still on the side table that I haven't used because I got it right without them. And
Right.
then I feel very good about it. I feel, yeah. So
It's almost, yeah. It's a place where you go and it's very in the moment. So all the
yes,
things that we talk about, with the meditation, everybody's like, be in the moment, stay present. Well, when you are doing something where you do feel that flow state, you are being in the moment and present. It is a
right.
time our brain doesn't ever stop, but I think when we do something to attain flow state, it is where our brain is most calm and all that chatter is diminished because we're completely focused on and you have to work into that. You might start your floral arrangement and I'm just going to pontificate here, be frustrated that you don't have purple flowers and you're like, I meant to get those purple flowers. I saw those purple flowers. So in the beginning it's happening, right? Like you're doing the things that we do when being human. But
Being
then
too, yeah,
yeah,
overthinking it. Yeah.
yeah, but as you continue to let yourself work, that kind of dissipates, and kind of goes
Yeah.
away and you're
It's
just
like,
there.
let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's just see what happens with what I've got.
Yeah.
Same thing as if you're sitting quietly and you've got just a jumble of stuff going on in your head.
Mhm.
If you just took a sheet of paper uh, and started writing, physically handwriting,
Mhm.
printing, cursive, whatever it is you do,
Mhm.
and just putting those thoughts down on paper, what as they come to you, just put them on paper. It's stream of consciousness kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Just in the moment, getting them out
Right.
can create a wonderful sense of surrender, release, relief, stresslessness. It's like releasing it all. So I love this conversation because I think so many of the people who are watching and many of my clients struggle with this because they're challenged
Right.
daily, everyday challenges with all the roles they play, and
Mhm.
finding the time to have a little fun,
Right.
finding the time to focus on their own well-being,
Mhm.
their own self-care is a challenge in and of itself. But it's so important that we create those moments of flow so
Yes.
that we can feel that release of stress, that calmness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I can imagine that getting into this flow state could help so many areas of our lives, including our relationships, right? Both personally and professionally,
Right.
right? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I have to say, I want to touch on something you said as well before
Sure.
that. One of the things that I really talk about and support is doing things like in a 1-inch square. So sometimes when we start talking about doing these things, a lot of people don't have an hour, but do you have 10
Yeah.
minutes?
Yeah.
Do you have a little notepad by your desk that you can just doodle? Can you turn on a song and go in the bathroom and dance real quick for a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
So really learning that it doesn't have to be these long periods of time, but knowing that when you are incorporating those 1-inch square times, when you do go to be in the longer period of time, you can access that state, I think, easier because you're already
Mm.
preparing yourself to go there.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that 1-inch square. That's a great way to put it.
yeah, it's from Anne Lamott, a book that she wrote. She always said, start with a 1-inch square. And I learned about it in like the 90s and it stayed with me and it's my thing.
Yeah.
Whenever I get overwhelmed, I'm like, start with the 1-inch square. That's all we have to do. And then I forgot the next part of the question.
No, how getting into flow, into that calm state can help our relationships personally and
Okay. Thank
professionally.
you. Yeah. Okay. So, my biggest thing that I think about and talk about and work with people on is, our relationship with ourself. And many times as women, we're doing all the roles and we get lost in all the roles. And so I think that finding these moments, these 1-inch square moments, whatever they are for you, gets us back into connection with ourselves, right? I also think that when we do that and connect with our loved ones or coworkers, we're coming from a more authentic place because we've given ourselves the space to be who we are through these activities. Because when we do things like this, we are coming back to a little bit of the inner child. We are coming back to who we were before we became all the things. Just our truth, expression, creativity, um, giving ourselves space, giving the frustration voices. Then we're not reacting, we're responding because we're coming into more of a calm place. Before we have that conversation, do a doodle, practice breathing in and breathing out for a few minutes. Really being conscientious about not just going through the motions, like I call it Groundhog Day. And I know that's been the experience of a lot of people over the last couple of years because of everything the world has been through. So it's taken even more energy and effort that way. But, my bottom line is that when you have a relationship with yourself, and it can be a good relationship or a better understood relationship, then it automatically transfers to our other relationships. Um, the other thing that I think is really important about this is that one of the most powerful things, of course, is having a relationship with ourselves, but a lot of healing and finding flow and things like this happens in community. And that's community can be a lot of different things, right? It could be with your dog, it could be like with your flowers, but there is something about being in person with people doing some of these things sometimes. There's something really healing about that. That's why throughout the ages, you've seen people, drumming in circles, and art and art making wasn't so separate from our lives, or dancing wasn't separate. Cultures had that as part of their culture. This is what they did. So I think that's something to remember, that we live in the United States. It can be very individual focused, right? It's different in different parts of the world, of course, and even different within, but generally our system is like, do it yourself, be on your own, don't ask for help. So I think if women are wanting to try some of these things or implement some of these things, it would be really great to recruit a friend or an aunt or even a child, because not everything has to be done in isolation. And true healing, no, we're not talking about doing deep work, but I think true healing really happens in community. And I think we're kind of seeing the effects of what losing our communities does through this pandemic. Yeah.
I think that's so important, and I think you're so right. We have been forced, right, to lose our community, to lose our connections with people, because
Yes.
we weren't able to connect the way we typically did.
Right.
So I think it's very important that we find ways to reconnect whenever we can.
Yes.
And here's the truth of it, from my experience. It's so much easier when we don't try to do it alone.
Yeah.
When we find people who get us, who get what we're going through, who may be going through a similar thing, and we can commiserate and compare notes and help each other through it, it's so much easier. It's
Yes.
so much easier. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think you're right also, that when we do these things to connect with ourselves, when we are able to express ourselves authentically, in whatever way that works for you, then that relationship with ourselves gets stronger, and people can't help but notice that,
Right.
because it just shines through. Like it or not, it just shines through.
It does. Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
the it affects the people around us. So if we are happier, if we are calmer, if we're less stressed, then we can model that, and it rubs off. It
Yes.
rubs off. We can't help it.
We can't.
It's a good place to be. It's a really good place to be. Okay, Stephanie,
Mm-hmm.
the last part of every episode we do on tips for the transition is to ask my guest what their best tips are, the practical strategies and tips
Okay.
that people can walk away with today. So my loyal viewers say this is their favorite part. So let's hear what your tips are. What's your first one?
Okay. My first one is what we just talked about, and that is connection. So finding connection with yourself in some way. And I recommend it being in some of the things we talk about. Okay. And then the next, and within one, is connection with other people. And if you can find a way to be with a person in real life, that is the best.
Mm.
That's tip number one.
Okay, so the human connection,
The human
right?
connection.
The
Yes.
human connection. I connect with my fur babies all the time. It's helpful, but the conversations I have with those who care about me and I care about, are the most fulfilling, the most satisfying. So I totally agree with you based on my own experience. I think that, and even if you can't connect face to face, even connecting for me, I through this pandemic, connecting with people I love through Zoom has been a godsend. It's been a
Yeah.
lifesaver.
Right.
So however you can connect. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Tip number 2.
Tip number two is to really engage your senses throughout the day. And, we tend to work, like I said, I'm calling it Groundhog Day. So, really focusing on what is around you, orienting to your space, looking for all the things that are blue, bringing in a scent, bringing in greenery, finding something that feels good in your hand. So really thinking about touch, taste, smell, hearing, paying more attention to those parts of our being, right? Instead of just walking through the motions. When we do that, it kind of starts to awaken us in ways that maybe we're not paying attention to. There's a lot of information from our senses. So that's tip 2.
Yeah, so I think it's really noticing the little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And intentionally, right? Making it an intention to bring those little things that bring you joy kind of into your moment, right? There's a, being present in the moment again is important, and noticing those little things. I like that. And exercising all of your senses to do that.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. All right. Do you have another one?
I do. I think the next one that's really important and helps is movement. So we are connecting with people in whatever way, if we can, or an animal, and we are using our senses, and now we need to use our bodies, right? So whatever that looks like for you. I definitely am a fan of putting on some music and chair dancing. I will do it in between sessions. I also do some stretches. We call it chair yoga, but you can just call it stretches. So doing something to be in your body. Our senses are helping us do that, but really moving. So whatever that is for you, right?
Yeah, so many of us are working from home, sitting in front of our computers for 8 hours a day and forget that we need to get up and move around because our body is made to do that, right? We're designed for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that movement also helps to calm us down and
Yes.
reduce stress.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We have time for one more. What you got?
For one more, I'm going to say breathe, because it's the easiest and most organic thing that we can do. We don't have to have any special tools, but we need to practice, because a lot of us, you've heard this, I'm sure, but we're breathing shallow. And when we're breathing shallow, we're not helping our body. We're not getting oxygen to our brain, our extremities, all the things. So just doing a really simple practice of, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. Very simple. Implement it. You can do it before you get on a call, before you have a meeting that you're not really that into going to, before you have to help your kid with math. I don't know. It just really gets you into your body. It's free. It takes seconds, and it calms us down, and it brings our heart rate down. It just has a lot of benefits, and it's, like I said, free and pretty easy.
And it's something I think many of us take for granted.
Yes.
It's just one of those involuntary things that just happens. So long as we're alive, we're breathing.
Yeah.
But it's the intentional breathing, right?
Right.
It is taking the moment it takes to
Right.
do the 4 count, like you suggested. Breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, exhale for 4. There are so many techniques for breathing intentionally, but making it an intention and allowing it to help you.
Yeah.
Right. So as you breathe in, just breathe in all the good energy and breathe out all the stress. Right. Make an intention
Right.
for what that exercise is going to do for you in this moment. I love that. It's a great one to end on, because we all, I think, just go through the motions often during our day. So being intentional about how we express ourselves, allow us to be calm, release the stress, and breathe, connect with ourselves in different ways. Stephanie, I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show today, because I hope we've reminded our audience how important it is that expressing ourselves, that we have so much control really over the stressors we feel and how they affect us by
Absolutely. Yeah.
taking some of your tips and some of your advice into practice. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was
Now,
great.
I know that many of our people watching are going to want to connect with you directly. So would you tell us the very best way to do that?
Yes. So I have a special gift for people that want to connect with me too.
Oh,
And they can
great.
find it by going to www.artflowlounge.com. That's artflowlounge.com. And you'll be able to sign up for your free gift, and then you'll get all my contact information from that.
That's perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. The Art Flow Lounge. I
Yeah,
love the sound of that. That sounds like fun.
it is.
All right, Stephanie, again, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And I want to thank everyone else for watching and listening. I really appreciate your being a part of this community. And as I said at the top of the show, if anything strikes a chord for you, there are ways to connect with Stephanie and me in the show notes or the comments below this video. We would love for you to continue this conversation with us. So connect with Stephanie or connect with me. I would love to have you join my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap, where we continue lots of conversations there. So you'll find that link in the show notes as well. And then let's meet again here next Wednesday when I greet my next guest. You know, I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, turning transition into triumph.